welcome to our workshop. We still got like 10 minutes before we start, but I saw most of you signed in on our Food Council sign-in sheet. This is a sign-in sheet for the Family Resource Center. They just keep track of everyone who comes to the building and uses the room. So I am going to pass this around if you could fill it out. And then while we're kind of waiting for a few more people to show up and before we start, we figured we'd just go around and folks could introduce themselves and share maybe what their interest is in being here, whether it's specifically about eggs, selling eggs, raising chickens, food safety plans, selling produce at the harvest box or farmer's market, whatever you got going on. So we'll start with you. You can introduce yourself and then you can fill it out and pass it along.
So my name is Anna Boatsman. I'm here pretty much for all the above. I like to attend any workshops so that I have that certification ahead of time. I also work closely with Pelican Bay Community Gardens in helping expand and do that. We also run a worm farm, and they're getting ready to start a chicken endeavor too. So this was one way for me to be able to tell them, you guys need to come take this. So it helps with my employment too.
Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hi, my name is Shelly McBell, and I just got a couple chickens, and I'm here to learn how to take care of the eggs.
I'm just helping with the stream.
Roger. I got a flock of chickens, and I'm just looking to find out about the egg handling and selling legally.
Okay.
My name's Matt. Basically the same thing he said. I'm just trying to see all the safety protocols and everything and such for the egg handling.
My name is Melanie. I work here for the school gardens. For a second I thought I was speaking Spanish. And I also have chickens, so I better be aware of what I'm supposed to do. My name's Anita, and I have maybe 60 chickens or so, and I do plan on selling at farmer's market.
I'm Terry. I have an orchard and chickens, and I'm just here to learn. I thought it had to be yours. I love butterflies.
We're just introducing ourselves and why we're here, what we're interested in learning today.
I know that. I can learn and see what this is about.
Great. Thanks for coming. I am Megan Kenny. I work for the Northwest Growers Association down in Humboldt. I came up to visit you guys today. We operate farmers markets down there. We are just launching a food hub. We also have a harvest box program. We've been working really closely with Drea and the Community Food Council for a long time, so I'm excited to be up here. I've been doing a lot of food safety classes and studying, so I can help answer some of those types of questions if you guys have that specifically about, well, especially about produce, but just sort of generally as well.
My name is Marina, and I'm the food operations manager for the Community Food Council. So I'm the person you want to reach out to if you want to sell your eggs and produce too.
I'm Amanda. I also work on stock.
We have someone new coming in. Welcome.
Is it introductions?
Yeah, we're just doing introductions.
Nancy Bassett. This person.
Great to have you.
My name is Aya Mahan, and I work for the Food Council. I'm the food program manager, and I've been working hard to learn all the egg handling and egg handling certification protocols to share with you today.
I'm Drea. I'm the food program director for the Community Food Council, and Aya has put together an incredible workshop and also some information about our program. So thanks for coming. And we'll let Aya take it away.
Yeah. We still have about 4 minutes. Should I just get started?
No, maybe we could wait. Maybe you could talk about the papers that are at people's
Sure.
desks.
So in front of you, I put 2 different packets. One is specific to egg handling, and it's the egg handling registration form. which we'll be going over today. And the other is a food safety plan template provided by CAF. And we're going to be going over that as well today. There's also a bunch of additional resources on the table in the back where Amanda's sitting. There's more information on the egg quality management program back there and just some additional resources. There's also a packet of information if you would like to sell to our food pantry or harvest box back there as well.
If you wanted to sell to those, is it just eggs or could it be?
No, you can sell, yeah, we will take what you've got. So, yeah, which is, yeah, if you have like produce or anything in abundance, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do with all this zucchini?
Yeah.
You can sell to our food pantry. Yeah.
Is there anybody that needs like an extra pen? Thank you.
And then I have paper if anybody wants to take any notes.
Oh, no, I had a question.
Oh. What's your question?
When selling to like the food pantry and whatnot, how do you go about like the price per pound? How does that work?
Price per pound, how does, for
Like-
eggs, for
Well, no, that's not go
produce?
by a dozen, but yeah, produce.
produce? I don't have like,
How does that work basically? Like you just write a number down and send us a check?
I have not like created anything like give people an idea yet.
Usually it is, I don't know off the top of my head. We do try to do like fair market value and most people are selling, not selling wholesale goods. I haven't, do you do the same?
Yeah, I mean, we ask the farmers for their prices. A lot of our farmers either, especially in first-time farmers, kind of like go to farmers markets and look around at what other people are charging.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, like try to go around and see what others and get
Yeah.
like a baseline.
Yeah, because, like, depending on the size of different people's operations and what your inputs are, everyone has different prices, but you can usually find a pretty good, like, $1 to $2 range, so you can figure out, like, well, if I go on the lower end, I might sell more, but it might not cover the cost of what you're putting in, but, so you can sort of figure that out. For wholesale pricing, I know a lot of our farmers also call, like, our local co-ops and grocery stores to find out what those standard prices are, which generally produce managers, especially at local stores, are pretty nice about sharing that information, maybe not at like Safeways and Rays and stuff like that.
So I was wondering like it's kind of hard to compete against Walmart and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean their food quality is going to be way
Way
less
lower.
than yours. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. It's 5:30, So just a little background about the Food Council. We work collaboratively to co-create a local food system that provides access to healthy, culturally relevant, and preferred foods for Del Norte and tribal lands. So we have a lot of different programs in the community. One of them is to support our local farmers. It's hard to have access to local produce if we don't have a vibrant, thriving local farming community. So we're really trying to do a lot of work to provide technical training and workshops like this one to our small farmers. And then like we were just talking about, we do buy local produce and products for our harvest box as well as for our food pantry. For our workshop today, I have just a brief agenda here. We're going to talk first about egg safety and egg handling, and then we'll move into, we're going to have a little raffle in the middle to break things up a little bit. We'll be raffling off, I think, a t-shirt and a sticker, and then we're going to move into food safety plans, and we'll introduce what a food safety plan is, why it's important, and then we'll watch a short video from CAF, and that goes over the food safety template that you guys all have. And then we'll just close up mentioning a few upcoming workshops, and I do have an evaluation form that I would love for you guys to fill out when you're done with the workshop. That just helps us so we can improve our workshops and keep having them.
raffle tickets, or you've already done that?
I haven't done that yet.
Okay, gotcha.
Thanks, Drea. So egg handling in California, will start, California has some pretty significant regulations about having eggs we'll get into. We're just gonna go over a little bit of chicken safety, specifically biosecurity, and then we'll go through the process of handling eggs, cleaning the eggs, grading eggs, and how to label and pack eggs as well. And we'll go over that egg handling certification paper that you guys have in front of you as well. So, question that has been debated since the beginning of time. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Scientists have determined that the protein that actually builds the eggshell is made by the hen. Therefore, the chicken came before the egg. So we are going to just start this presentation, like I said, talking about chicken safety, making sure that we have safe, healthy birds so we know that our eggs are going to not be contaminated. So what is biosecurity? Biosecurity is kind of one of those intimidating words, but it really is just procedures that are used to prevent the introduction and spread of disease caused by organisms. So the ideal thing to do is to reduce our risk of spreading those diseases by implementing biosecurity measures into our daily routine of raising our birds. As many of you may know, chickens are susceptible to a variety of avian and zoonotic diseases. Some are really easily treatable, some will take out your whole flock in a few days. So it is preventable, and with proper biosecurity and vaccinations and providing enough space for your chickens, it is preventable. So just a little bit more on chicken biosecurity, just like best practices. You technically want to keep your visitors to a minimum in your coop. You're going to want to wash your hands before and after coming in contact with poultry. You could provide disposable boot covers if you have a bigger operation, or disinfectant foot baths. I know some people just have like their muck boots that they wear into their coop as well. I think that's definitely fine. And welcome, thanks for joining us as well. And then also you want to make sure that you're cleaning and disinfecting the tools that you use in your coop. And you want to make sure that your birds have fresh water and clean food. I have a few chickens as well, and I was having issues with my chickens like kicking up a bunch of like the pine and poop into their food, so we had to mitigate that and get a different feeder. Also, you always want to be looking for signs of illness in your birds, and there is a sick bird hotline that you can call, and they'll take you through the different steps to find out what's wrong with your bird. Also, the UC Cooperative does a really good job. They'll help you like diagnose it. You can send in a sample if one of your like chickens dies. You can send in a sample and they'll help you find out what was the matter with your chicken, which is really relevant if it might be passed on to your other birds. So now getting into the egg handling. First thing you're going to want to do is clean your eggs, and this may be debatable to some people. I know a lot of backyard flock farmers don't necessarily like wash and refrigerate their eggs right away.
We live off grid, so refrigeration is at a minimum.
Yes, I understand that. So, unfortunately for the egg handler certification, they do require that you wash and sanitize and rinse and dry and then refrigerate your eggs. But there are other options. Like you said, you don't necessarily have to wash your eggs right away, but if you are going to be selling them, that's the preferred method and what's required for the egg handlers.
So when it says like special requirement eggs, I mean, for example, they have balut on there, that's okay, but not if you were to put on your eggs like with bloom, so then no refrigeration is needed, because the bloom protects the egg from all pathogens. Basically.
Yeah. So I think that it would be refrigerate or refrigerate upon purchase or something like that. You would have to look into that, and it would have to be eggs that were bought from your premises. They wouldn't be able to be like
So I couldn't sell them at a store or at a farmer's market? It'd have to be
not
on
that way.
premises.
If they were on the premises, and we'll get to that in the presentation, if you're selling your eggs on the premises, some things are a little bit different.
Okay.
So cleaning eggs, is it Matt?
Yes.
Matt was mentioning there is a bloom on the eggs, so when you wash those eggs, that comes off, which means that you need to refrigerate them. And washing eggs, actually, you need to be very careful when you wash your eggs because they can be susceptible to more bacteria. So it's really important that your water be at least 90 degrees or 20 degrees warmer than the egg. And that's also important because you could crack your eggs as well if your water temperature isn't right. And then also your water, if you're measuring in your water, you want to make sure that it's 2 parts per million of iron, or it doesn't have more iron because low iron in eggs is actually a defense against bacteria. And then finally, never soak your eggs. You always want to keep them under that running water. When you soak them, they are porous, so it allows bacteria to come in to them. In terms of washing your eggs, a good alternative is just like unscented, dye-free dishwashing detergent. But if you do use a chemical, just make sure that it's recognized as safe by the FDA. So once you wash your eggs, you're going to want to sanitize them. So you spray them with, I guess, a diluted bleach would be a great option. I'm sure there's plenty of other like marketed products, but a diluted bleach of a half a tablespoon of bleach per gallon of water gives you that right between 50 parts and 200 parts per million of bleach. And that's going to remove any bacteria that might be remaining after you've washed them. After you sanitize them, you're going to want to rinse them. Again, you want that water to be 20 degrees warmer than the eggs and have it be continuously running, and then you'll wipe them with a washcloth to dry. It's very important that you get them dry before you put them in the refrigerator. Putting wet eggs in the refrigerator can, again, create more of an environment for bacteria to grow. And then you're going to want to keep them refrigerated between 35 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So another part of selling eggs is grading eggs, and this is where things are a little bit tricky. But essentially, grading allows consumers to know what they're buying and what they're going to get when they crack open their breakfast in the morning. It's determined by measuring both the exterior as well as the interior of eggs. And like I said, they have to be labeled as well with their grade. And I'm sure we're familiar with these grades, AA, A, and B. How are the eggs graded? They use a tool called a candler, which shines light through the egg. Is anybody in this room familiar with egg candling? A few of you? Very good. So it's looking for air cell size, the egg white thickness, and the yolk quality. And obviously candlers can look different depending on your flock size. If you have 25 chickens, it's probably going to be a different instrument than if you had 2,500. And so here's just a little bit more about the egg grades. The AA grade is going to have a firm, thick yolk, or thick egg white and a round, high yolk. And it will be free of any kind of defects with clean, unbroken shells. A grade A is going to have whites that are slightly less firm and most of the same characteristics of that AA grade. And then B grade is going to have a flatter yolk with a thinner white, and the shells may show slight stains, but there won't be any kind of like fecal matter on them. If there is fecal matter or cracks, any grade below B isn't considered safe for consumption. Yes?
How do you tell if the white is slightly less firm than an eggshell?
That.
light comes through the egg.
Okay.
So, thank you. But yeah, it's based off of the light and the candler, which shines the light through the egg. I wish I had a way to do a sample of that for us.
You have the picture on the slide before though that shows the
Yes.
light kind
So
of
you
coming
can
through.
see the air in these. Let's see. You can see the amount of air up here and the grade, and then the amount of light that's coming through as well. So. And then you'll also want to size your eggs. So size is determined by the weight of an individual egg. I have Selkie chickens, so I had to make sure we had the peewee eggs on here too, because I love my little chicken eggs. But they range anywhere from peewees to jumbo eggs, and that's just based on the weight. So when you are labeling and packing your eggs, there are specific things that need to be on the label in California to sell your eggs. Simple things, your name, your address and zip code. Keep refrigerated needs to be on there. The Julian pack date, is anyone familiar with the Julian pack date? So the Julian pack date is the day of pack, and it's measured using the 365 days of the year. So if you packed your eggs on January 1st, your Julian date pack day would be 001. If you packed your eggs on December 31st, your Julian pack date would be 365. So it's based off of the day in the year out of that 365 days. And there is, if you look up like the Julian calendar, there'll be one for leap year as well. And then your sell-by date is always going to be 30 days from the date of pack. And you'll include the size and grade on there, as well as your CDFA registration number, which is what you'll get after you complete the egg handler's certificate registration form in front of you. They'll issue you your registration number, and then you'll also list on there that you're shell egg food safety compliant, and we'll go into what that is in just a moment. And then I did put on here, if you have like multiple size eggs in a carton, you need to label it with the smallest size in the carton. So if you have like one chicken that lays jumbo eggs, but all your other ones are laying large eggs, you can just put that in and label it as large. Does anyone have any other questions? There are some exceptions to labeling, as I mentioned. So you can, if you don't have to list the size, grade, name, and address if you have a flock of 500 hens or fewer and they're sold directly to household consumers on the premises where they're produced without advertising. So if you have chickens and you're growing them in your backyard, you can sell them to your neighbors. You don't have to label them, but you do still have to have that egg handler certification. There's some other exceptions. If you sell them at a retail property marked for bulk display and packaged, they have to be packaged in the presence of the purchaser. So there are some exceptions. Also, if you have over 3,000 laying hens, you need to comply with a whole nother FDA egg safety rule. So if you're going that big, I had a feeling we probably more in that group. Another idea for labeling, and it's optional, is to just put some personal touches in, maybe a short message about you and your family, the story of how you started your farm, what your farm hours are, your website, where people can find your eggs. And then there is alternate language that you can use that doesn't require certification. So that would be like homegrown, naturally raised, farm fresh, freshly laid. And you don't need to have a certification to use those terms, but they kind of come across as something that you'd want to buy without a certification. So the California Shell Egg Food Safety Compliance is mostly for producers who have more than 3,000 hens, but it is required, and it's mostly in regard to a space requirement for chickens. So if you look at the chart, for one chicken, you need a minimum space of 332 square inches, and then that goes up to 9 or more. And the reason for this is that when chickens have more space, they have found that there's less ability for salmonella to grow. So having that space is really important. And if you do have more than 3,000 hens, you have to implement the salmonella reduction measures and then label that accordingly and submit your chickens to testing and vaccination as well. So the big part, the CDFA egg handler certification. I know this is a big slide with lots of text, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys saw what the law is, because in California, technically, if you own chickens, you're required to become a certified egg handler, which is something that when I found that out, I was very surprised because I didn't even realize that. Even if they're just like pets, which is how we kind of started having our chickens. My daughter wanted to have pets, and so, but it is required. And then if you're going to sell any kind of fowl eggs or poultry eggs in California, you're also required to have that egg handler certification. And there's no exemptions to that registration requirement. So if you guys want to flip open the CDFA egg handlers form, I thought we would just kind of take a minute to go over it. So the first page is the first section is fairly simple. You're going to use your company or farm name, or if you have like a partnership name, you could utilize that as well. You want to have your street address or the premises where your chickens are. If you don't get mail there, you're going to also include your mailing address. And then in section 2, your business information, you're going to want to choose like what kind of egg handling are you doing? Are you simply producing? Are you producing and packing? Are you distributing eggs? And then you'll list the person who's most responsible for your flock.
So if you were like a home egg producer and you were selling eggs to the pantry, would you be a producer, packer, and a distributor and wholesaler?
We would be the distributor wholesaler.
Okay.
That would
So
be
you'd
us.
just be the producer, packer.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question from something before this.
Yes.
It says no advertisement. So if you put it on the website of your community, I have 12 eggs for sale, is that advertisement? Or if you have a little sign?
I think advertisement would be if you were paying money
for.
if you were like running an ad in the newspaper or something like that, is how I would see advertisement, but don't hold me to that either. But I feel like that's super informal and that's kind of just like a community connection.
I used to advertise on Facebook, and then they kept flagging me, so I had to come up with special words so the algorithm couldn't figure it out.
But
Right.
a community flagging, not like somebody.
It was
authority.
against Facebook rules to advertise food on their.
Oh, interesting.
And technically, word of mouth is still advertising.
Best advertisement in the world.
It is.
Yeah.
Cheapest too.
Yeah. I guess I'll leave that up to you guys and how you want to interpret it.
It was part of one of the regulations if you're selling your eggs.
It was an exemption back here. Flocks with 500
You know,
hens or fewer. You
Oh,
know,
so if you're
when I made
500
this presentation, I almost deleted those 2 words too, because I was like, without advertisement. But the truth is, advertising, I think, would be, I don't know.
Okay.
But what if you're not a business? What if you're just raising chickens?
I think that would be not advertising then. If you're just like inviting people that you know, word of mouth, I might have to research what advertising would be now.
I mean, do you have to put in the whole producer, packer, and all that jazz if you just have chickens for yourself?
If you have chickens for yourself, where are we here? You would just be a producer only, because you're not, right?
Yeah.
And then if you pack your eggs, but I would say just a producer, if you don't plan to sell them.
This one here actually has information.
Oh, good. Let's see if that works. So So a producer only is a person engaged in the business of producing eggs from domesticated fowl for human consumption. And there is, on the front page, it kind of goes over like a lot of the sections. So the next section would be section 3, and that is regarding the flocks and the egg information. So the first section will be the egg product type. I would imagine most of you that's shell eggs, but there's an option for liquid eggs as well as dry eggs as well. And then information about your flocks on premises. You can give the approximate amount of laying birds and the cases that are produced or handled monthly. So 1 case is equal to 30 dozen eggshells. So my guess would probably be, I know when I did it, it was less than 1 case. But depending on how many you're producing. And then there is a section on the bottom there for a USDA grading program, and that would be an optional program or a voluntary program where you could get your eggs graded and get a certification graded from the USDA. So that would be an additional program that you would apply for. And similarly, special requirement eggs, that would be a spot where if you were a certified organic producer, you would write organic, or other distinguishing qualities would be like cage-free, free range, but that's only if you've been certified in that one section. And then finally, there is a small mill fee responsibility. If you sell all your eggs on your premises, you're exempt from that mill fee. If you do sell your eggs, it's 15 cents for 30 dozen eggs. So it's not a lot of money. It's a small fee. And then, do we have anybody from out of state selling eggs into California? Not in their room?
I just know somebody.
Okay. So if you are outside of California, you can still sell your eggs. You just need somebody in California to designate as like your agent who would be able to receive like the service of process and actions by the state or department. So that would be like your designated person to act on your behalf in California. And then finally, it is $75 to register per year and $50 to renew it every year thereafter. And they expire at the end of the year, regardless of when the payment was received. So if you paid tomorrow, you would have to repay again January 1st, unfortunately, because it works per year.
I saw it said somewhere, unless you pay in November, then it'll carry
Yes,
through the
it's
next
true.
year.
If you pay after November, it will kick through for the next year, which is, thank you for saying that, because that is a few extra months at the end of the year.
And what do we get for that $75?
You would get a CDFA registration number that you would utilize when you're labeling your eggs. And you would put that on your package for labeling eggs. And you would get that certification. And you would be able to consider yourself a certified egg handler following all the rules of California.
So now any person who ever wants to own chickens has to pay $75 a year to own them? Or 50 after going
50
forward?
there forward, yeah.
Huh.
So I think part of my understanding of why they do this is mostly for like tracking. So if someone gets sick or
Yep.
there's a disease in the eggs, or especially with avian flu, I know that when we were hearing about avian flu in Humboldt and Del Norte, like unless people were calling it in, they might not be able to track it. So I think it's more about kind of tracking disease
Yes.
and people getting sick or chicken flocks getting sick more than anything.
Yeah, thank you, Drea. I appreciate that clarity.
That should cost us money to do that.
Pay the people to process the paperwork.
So I'll get the cookies.
So just some ideas of where to sell your eggs. There's the farmers markets, small grocery stores, craft fair, and flea market, and then again our Pacific Pantry and Harvest Box as well. All right, does anyone have any questions on chicken biosecurity or egg handling? For the slideshow? Yes, actually, if you guys sign in and leave an email, I will email you guys this presentation, and it does have like active links, and then at the end there's a whole page with all the resources as well. Sure.
We'll probably get put on our website.
Yes, and it will get put on our website. We have added a new tab on our website for small producers, and that's where you can find a lot of links to different resources as well to help you guys get your farm started. All right, now we're going to do a little raffle. Everybody had tickets?
I do have a question.
Yes.
So in considering a business plan to see whether or not this fits, how do we find out what eggs are selling for? Different sizes, different kinds of eggs.
And that was
different
another
egg
question
rolls.
that came up earlier too regarding selling to our pantry is finding what is the fair price.
Yeah.
It's about $10 at the farmer's market right now for a dozen of organic chicken eggs.
Right.
So, certified organic at the farmer's market, so they're jumping through all the hoops and doing all this sort of stuff.
How do you
At least
know?
in Humboldt, that's a standard price.
Some of those things.
What
that-
about registered organic
Yeah.
for small producers?
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. There's also some templates out there, and I'll see if I can find one to put with these resources that you can fill out, like your cost of your chickens, your cost of your feed, the cost of your water,
Yeah,
your
that's
containers,
right.
and kind of do the calculations of how much it's costing you to actually produce those eggs, and
Right.
then add your percentage to have a profit and get your calculation. I know like Shakeport Farm has some really detailed like spreadsheets where they figured out the cost of their eggs, and if you do have
That's
like
good to know ahead of time.
livestock, like protection dogs too, those can be written off as part of your farm business if they're protecting your flocks. So, all right, does everyone have a ticket? So we are raffling off. We're gonna pay for your egg handler registration. If you win and you don't want it, then you get a shirt and a sticker instead. And we'll get again for someone that we're gonna pay for their egg handling certification. So you have to know your number since you didn't think you right.
Okay, lucky number 105.
Did you win? You want your egg handler paid for, or do you want a shirt?
Why not?
Yeah? Okay.
Cool. Awesome.
All right, next person gets a shirt and a sticker.
In the system now.
Oh, and the next one is 106.
All right! Raking it in,
I
guys.
Wait, what did I win?
You
A
want a
shirt.
shirt and a sticker.
Oh, awesome, thank you.
What size shirt?
2XL, you got it.
We do. All right, how are you guys feeling? Are you ready to move on to food safety? Okay. So food safety plans, they ensure that farmers and producers are producing quality food that's safe for consumption. The food safety plans themselves kind of establish the best practices for your farm, and they reduce the risk. And they're really woven into everything that happens on your farm with a goal of delivering safe, quality food. I was on a call this week and somebody said this, and I thought that's really relevant. When you have nothing in place to mitigate risk, you will not be prepared. But if you have something in place, you can be confident that you're taking actions to mitigate those risks. So it's really about seeing what could be a risk and then writing measures in place to make sure that you're mitigating that risk or eliminating it. So we are going to use a food template to create our food safety plan that came from CAF, the California Alliance for Family Farmers. But you really want to make sure that the practices are integrated into how you work. So some things on that template may not feel like it's the right wording for you, or you may do something different on your farm. So I would really encourage you to put it in your words and make it something that you feel confident that you're doing or you can do, so it actually gets done and it doesn't get forgotten. And then also realizing that your food safety plan is a working document, and you're always going to be working on it and building on it and coming up with new ways to mitigate risk. And then there are options to get verification or certification by a third party for your food safety plan. So it's not necessary, but you do have that option if you want, which might open up larger market opportunities for you. So you guys all met Megan at the beginning, but I just wanted to put her name out there because she did come up for this workshop, and she has a lot of knowledge on food safety plans. So I may and very well pass your questions on to her. And I have a video to show as well that's going to go over the template.
Could you share one of the reasons why we're going over it?
So one of the reasons that we are going over food safety plans is because to sell to our food pantry with some of the funding that we got, this is where you want me to go with this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, some of the funding we got, LFPA funding for local food, money that we have to purchase local food for our pantry and local market. It comes with the need for farmers to have a food safety plan on file with their farm. So the goal of this workshop is to really introduce those food safety plans, maybe start filling yours out, and have a working document that you can leave here with and continue to utilize for your farm's best practices and standard operating procedures.
And just to follow up quickly, like to sell to our pantry, you don't always need that, but the funding that we'll be getting in July that we'll have for 2 years is a significant amount of funding. And to access that funding, you will need a food safety plan on file with us. No.
Where is your?
And not to sell to us using other funding streams, just this one funding stream that we'll have will require that.
Where is the pantry?
The pantry is actually located in the back of this building. Yeah. All right, so I scrolled through a little bit at the beginning of this, but it should be at a good spot here. And let me,
To learn more now.
my speaker turned off.
Is really dedicated to talking about food safety plans. And so I'm going to start with a brief overview and then get into some concrete examples of food safety plans using the CAP template. So I like to talk about food safety plans as similar to a business plan or an organic system plan if you are certified organic, in that a food safety plan can be an integral part of your farm operation. Food safety plans can help you get and stay organized around food safety and ensure that your farming practices account for and reduce food safety risks on your farm. At like a very basic level, food safety plans describe what you do and how you do it. And so an example of this would be in your food safety plan, you could explain what your cleaning and sanitizing practices are. And then you could also provide detailed instructions about how to clean and sanitize a harvest knife according to what you actually do on your farm. And the detailed instructions are typically referred to as standard operating procedures or SOPs. And I've seen farms that have SOPs on how to deliver an employee training, to how to manage a compost pile, to how to clean and sanitize a harvest knife. So it can really be tailored to what's most helpful for your farm, which also depends on who all is working on it as well. So food safety plans, a bit more about them. They can be completed using templates like the one that we will use today in this presentation. They should be completed by someone who's knowledgeable about your farm operation.
That doesn't look good.
loaded. We're at 6:40.
Presentation. They should be completed by someone who's knowledgeable about your farm operation and a person or the person responsible for food safety decisions on your farm. Typically, it's like the farm owner, or if the farm owner isn't involved in the day-to-day operations, it would be like the farm manager. It can also be a group of people. I've worked with a group of people who are like in a decision-making power at the farm, and they work together on it. They are unique to each farm and should be completed according to your farm's current food safety practices and not your desired practices. And this kind of dovetails nicely into the next point, which is that food safety plans are living documents and should be reviewed and updated annually. So if things do change and you go from current to desired, you'll be able to update that. And then some reasons why I've seen food safety plans as important through my work at CAP is that they help identify and address areas or practices that you might do at your farm that are at an increased food safety risk. They can also help you prepare for regulations, buyer questions, and third-party audits, and open up new market opportunities. And they can be used as a tool for employee training. So there's some overlap between other things that happen on your farm and food safety plans that make it a nice complement. So today, I'm going to introduce a food safety plan template that's been developed by CAP and describe how to use the plan in your operation. I'm not sure, I sent the food safety plan template to Ivy and Megan, so I'm not sure, can I get a thumbs up if you all have a copy of that?
Sorry about that.
Okay, great. So you're welcome to follow along with me if you have that with you now. You'll see some, I have some screenshots on the next slide, and so you can kind of follow along and get a feel for what I'm talking about. So the CAP's food safety plan template is divided into 10 sections, and it's based on good agricultural practices and also FSMA PSR requirements. It's primarily focused on good agricultural practices, but we did want to make a food safety template that fulfilled or helped a farmer fulfill the requirements of the FSMA produce safety rule. And so maybe right now you don't know how the federal regulation impacts you, and that's totally fine and pretty typical, but there is red text within the food safety plan that identifies required records. So at some point when you figure out how the regulation affects you, you might need to pay special attention to the highlighted red text. And then if not, the red text doesn't really apply to you from a regulatory standpoint, but it could still be something that you want to implement. So a little bit more about CAP's farm food safety plan template. The food safety plan template is designed to be completed from the beginning. And so, and then the format of the food safety plan is that has a lot of check boxes and options for you all to go through and check literally the boxes that apply to your operation. But inevitably, not all of the template text is going to apply to your farm, or there are likely practices that you're doing on your farm that are unique and not in the template. So you can expand on information or add information in the food safety plan template. And then you're doing it on your computer. You can also, eliminate some of the text that doesn't apply to your farm to make it a shorter document and maybe a little bit easier to share with folks. And then there are some sections that you might encounter that initially you think, oh, this doesn't necessarily apply to me. Like maybe You're not applying regulated agricultural chemicals. I think I would still recommend for you all to read through the sections and think maybe there is something within that section that it's talking about or that the template text is referring to that does apply to your operation. And then it oftentimes, when I'm working with farmers, it takes, several working meetings to complete a food safety plan. Instead of sitting down for several hours at once, we'll kind of break it up into chunks. And then as we're going through it, we'll start parts that we need to come back to or highlight sections that we need to come back to. So yeah, don't feel like it's something that you have to complete all in one pass. It's really like kind of an iterative process, at least at the beginning when you're just creating it. So these are the 10 sections of CAP's food safety plan. And so we're going to go through each section, and I've taken screenshots. I'm going to kind of describe a little bit about what each section highlights, and then a little bit about like what to expect or what to think about when you're going through these sections. So the first section is a general description, and this might be the easiest thing to fill out. You can see that there are blank spaces here to identify your farm name, to identify your food safety point of contact, the number of acres that you farm, and then some boxes to put the address of the farm locations where you're growing produce, and then also below that explaining or listing the crops that are covered under the plan. So maybe it makes sense for your farm if you have two distinct operations, one that grows tree fruit and one that's diversified vegetables. Maybe your farming practices for those operations are so different that you would have two food safety plans. And so you want to make sure that your diversified vegetables are listed as such, and then your stone fruit are listed on the other. Next, we'll cover water. So water does have the potential to be a pretty big food safety risk, depending on what your water source is and depending on how it's used. And so as you can see from this screenshot, the water section covers things like how you provide drinking water to your employees or to your volunteers. And then it also gets into how you irrigate your crops and what your water source is, and then how you use that water source. And so here you can start to see the use of check boxes. And so you would check whichever situation applies to your farm, and then fill in additional information like in the other section here, if the template language doesn't apply super uniquely to your operation. And then we're going to go on to manure and compost. So soil amendments that have animal input can also increase food safety risks on farms because there's bacteria in animal feces that can then end up in the soil or on the crops depending on a situation. And it's pretty common for farms to have varied practices related to manure and compost use. So this section has quite a few check boxes to choose from, even more than the screenshot captures. And so this section might be something to pay a little bit closer attention to. And then there's also the case that this template doesn't include language that exactly describes your farm's manure or compost practices. So I would recommend making sure to add your farm's unique information into this template somehow. And then we are going to go on to agricultural chemicals. So chemicals, instead of being a source of biological contamination, they can be a source of chemical contamination, depending on if a reentry period is followed correctly or if the chemical isn't used according to the label instructions. And so this section may or may not apply to your farm depending on chemical use, but it's still good to kind of evaluate what your current chemical use is on your farm. So if your farm applies regulated chemicals, like a non-OMRI approved pesticide, for example, you should include your operator ID information here that you're getting from your county ag commissioner. And then there's also information in this section that applies for OMRI listed chemicals, like how often are you calibrating and cleaning the equipment that you use to apply your agricultural chemicals. So still lots of information in here to help you evaluate chemical use on your farm. And now we'll get into land use. So the land use section identifies risks of previous land use. So what was the land being used for before you started farming the land? And then also adjacent land use, so thinking about what is surrounding your farm on all sides. And this section in particular has quite a few options to choose from. So you'll likely have to read pretty carefully to ensure that the information that is selected or checked or even in the template aligns with your farm's situation. There's also information here about a septic field, which is, or a septic tank, which is pretty common on farms, and so it could be an opportunity to say, oh yeah, like wait, where is the septic tank and field located on my farm? Usually it's next to the house and it's away from the land that's being farmed, so not a huge risk, but still really helpful to know where that is. Now we'll get into wildlife and domestic animals. So you'll notice, like at the front, the beginning of the wildlife and domestic animal section, there's this statement about biodiversity. And that's because in the history of foodborne illness outbreaks, way back in the early 2000s, a result of foodborne illness outbreaks was that folks were removing native habitat from around their farms because they believed that those native habitats were actually encouraging animals to visit their farms, which then became a source of contamination and resulted in foodborne illness outbreaks. But now there's research that's actually showing the opposite, and the government, so FDA, the folks at FSMA, and third-party audits and good agricultural practices do not require farmers to threaten or kill wildlife on their farm. And so that's why kind of this is up front and center. And then there are options of non-invasive animal control methods that your farm might use, like fencing or decoys. And so it's good to note them here. And then within this section, there's also space for you to identify how and if domestic animals have access to your farm. Generally, it's recommended that domestic animals like cats and dogs be excluded from growing areas and washed pack areas because they pee and poop in areas outside that may not be contained, and then they also might be tracking around other sources of feces from other animals, or just, generally not being able to be cleaned and sanitized. So that is a general good agricultural practice. So good to think about how your farm is hospitable or inviting, or just generally your rules or requirements for domestic animals. And then I will say within the wildlife and domestic animal section, there's not specifically a place where there's template language about your farm's use of livestock. And so I still recommend adding, livestock as it applies to your farm. And so you could do it within the animal section. You could also do it within the land use section. So it kind of depends on how your farm wants to go about doing that. Moving on, we are going on to the employee health and hygiene section. So employee health and hygiene can be a big or small food safety risk depending on how it's handled. So this section asks you to identify your employees and your employee training practices, like what should someone do if they're injured, and then how you train your employees on health and hygiene practices like washing their hands. And then the next section is about tools and equipment. So the tools and equipment section really focuses on identifying your farm's cleaning and sanitizing practices as they relate to harvest tools and equipment. These practices are typically accompanied by SOPs, which I talked about a little bit at the beginning. And so sometimes farms will actually have like separate SOP documents, and then they'll just reference the name of the SOP in their food safety plan, and then have all of the SOPs like in their own separate binder or booklet that are actually referenced as employees are doing those practices, so they don't have to sift through the food safety plan to find them. And now on to harvesting and packing. So the harvesting and packing section covers a myriad of practices, including how your employees are trained to harvest, and then also any post-harvest practices followed by your farm. So if you wash your crops, or if if you don't, if you pack them directly from the field and then take them to market. The final section is on traceability. So in this section, there's space to identify how your farm packs produce for market, and any labeling and records that occur. So labeling that you might affix to your boxes and the information that includes, and then any records that you use that can help trace product from the field to its end user. So traceability in a nutshell means being able to trace where the crop came from in the field, and even having records beyond that show the soil inputs, soil amendments that were used, but basically from the field to the end consumer. And so some farms will do that just using different records. Like you might have a harvest record that says on X date I harvested 20 pounds of lettuce mix. And then you might have an invoice that says, oh, like 10 pounds of that lettuce mix went to the farmer's market, and 10 pounds of that lettuce mix went to my CSA program. That could be one way that you trace where your product went from field to customer. Other farms that have maybe like a bit more of a complicated supply chain will develop what's called a lot code, which is basically a unique identifier number that can be used to track produce in a way that is like either affixed to the label on the box or noted on the harvest log and the invoice. So it might not make sense for your farm to invest a lot in creating a lot code, but it is important to keep in mind that you should be keeping these records that help you trace where your product came from to where it's going. So now I have just a few storage tips based on what I've learned from farms. Some farms really prioritize using like an analog version. So having a food safety binder with 3-ring hole punch can really help keep paperwork organized. Some growers prefer to use electronic storage systems such as their smartphone or apps. Even can help store data if you're noting when you're cleaning and sanitizing your harvest tools, for example, or Microsoft Word or Google Suite. At the end of the day, just make sure that the workers who need to access the information can. So maybe you use electronic storage for all of your documents, but the really important ones that your employees should follow, maybe you're printing those out and you're keeping them in a central location. So here are some resources if you're looking for more. I know I went through that pretty quickly, and it does to some degree assume there is some foundational knowledge of food safety. And so if you want to learn more, I encourage you to check out these resources. There's a GAPT course through Cornell. There's information about the FSMA PSR exemptions. There's also what's called the Produce Safety Alliance grower training, which is specifically developed for the FSMA PSR, so there's a lot of regulatory language in that training. I'd be happy to talk to you about whether or not that might be a good fit depending on what you're looking for. And then there are a lot of supporting food safety documents like templates for record keeping and risk assessments on CAP's website. So I have sent this to Megan, and so hopefully Megan can send it to all of you so you can click on these links and access the information. So I think we have about 5 minutes.
All right. I have those resources, or I have some of them that I can share as well, you guys. So my question is, do we have questions after that? Does anyone have any questions on the food? Terry?
So, there's no language in here about compost tea or compost extract sprayed on things. What sort of time spacing would there be before harvest for any of that? Because that's technically, you're spraying microbes on stuff.
Right. I don't know, Megan, do you know how to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, this food safety plan is really for your farm. So if there's like something specific that you want to, share, like if you have workers, you could record it on your food safety plan so that they know that they're not going to harvest certain crops within a certain time period. I know they're working on like exact regulations about like the proper length of time for that, but the USDA doesn't actually have like official guidelines for between that, so that's not necessarily something that is required in your food safety plan.
Yeah, because it does say on here, compost is only used on the ground till then. So, but I don't use compost, I use compost tea, I use compost extracts. And
Yeah, so you can just write that in. So instead of like these check boxes are just sort of like, if you want to quickly go through, you can check some check boxes if it does apply to you, and if it doesn't, don't check any of the boxes, and there should be a section in each one that says other.
Yeah.
And that's where you can write in specifically what you do. Because this template is also like, a lot of these things are for sort of larger scale growers, not necessarily for, if you have like a backyard garden even up to like 5 acres. So this template does look pretty excessive when you look at all of the different check boxes that you could possibly be checking. So just ignore them if they don't apply to you. And really just do what you guys actually do on your farm. If it's not, if you're using a drip line, don't say that you're going to sanitize the entire drip line every single month if you're not going to, because that's probably not something that anyone in this room needs to do. Or even sanitizing your harvest knife. Don't say that you do it every single day if you don't, because most of our farmers aren't necessarily on a scale where it's that important. So really just say what you are doing, and this plan isn't going to be like set to the USDA or anything for them to approve. Like this isn't to like tattle on you. It's more just like, this is what I'm doing. And a lot of these questions I think are just helpful to like, oh, that is something that I haven't thought about that I'm doing on my farm. So it just really is helping you think about all of the different aspects that you should be thinking about, not necessarily trying to have you fit into one of those check boxes if you don't.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Does anyone think they're going to do it? Yeah, the safety plan.
Oh, yeah.
It seems a lot more intimidating when you're looking at it than I feel like how like Grace actually breaks it down. Once you look through it, there's way fewer sections than it looks like. In each section, you really just need to sort of answer 1, maybe 2 questions per section. So it does take a lot less time. I sat down with one of our farmers who has a backyard garden, and it took us maybe like 15, 20 minutes to go through the whole thing, and then he had a food safety plan.
And that's just for like on record at your property, just doesn't have to be submitted or anything. Alright.
You can, and that's where on that template it has in red what if you wanted to get it certified.
I saw that in
Things.
Blue Pond as well.
Yeah, so but it's only really for your own personal like standard operating procedures. This is what we do.
Okay.
And then if you do have an employee on your farm, you're like, here, this is what we do.
Yeah.
I guess we're gonna end a little bit early tonight then, unless anybody wants to stick around. I do, if you guys wanna stay and like work on some of these, we're totally available to help you with that right now as well. And then I have an evaluation that I would love to have you guys fill out before you leave, please.
Actually, I do have a question.
Yes.
So we have a rooster, and this is the first time we've had chickens. So
Yeah.
like, how and when can we eat the eggs? Like right away? I'm assuming.
Yes.
But like, what's the?
I have, I think I have the information on that. This is all about dirty eggs, moldy eggs, stained eggs. I think it was in this presentation, sorry. I will look.
Second tomato.
Yeah, if the eggs are fertile, and I'm trying to think, maybe that was in one of these books that I had to bring out.
My eggs are fertilized.
And how many days after they're fertilized does it, before you have to harvest them? I think it's a,
Oh, well, if you don't have a hen sitting on them,
Yeah.
because once you have a hen that goes broody and sits on them, then the incubation starts. I think after like 45 degrees or something like that.
Oh, like right away?
Not right away.
Not right
several
away.
days.
Yeah, if you have a broody hen.
But as you candle it, you'll see the speck.
Yeah, you'll see. Yeah.
If you see the speck, then that's an actual fertilized egg.
Okay.
I feel like it's the same.
But then you can like just put it in the refrigerator on the
And that'll
counter
stop
and
it.
it'll-
Yeah.
Okay.
And on the counter, if you don't wash bloom, they're good on your counter for 21 days.
That's a long time.
Your knowledge.
So it's,
Huh?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I should have pointed to the lady. That's the learning experience. I guess I'll just.